The Serbian leader, who makes dramatic daily appearances issuing new decrees, sounds a little familiar, has assumed full power, promoting an outcry from opponents who say he has seized control of the state in an unconstitutional manner. It's interesting that in our case, now I'm not comparing President Trump directly with the president of Serbia, but the Democrats seem to be begging President Trump to be more like the Serbian president. They are asking President Trump, think about the criticism that President Trump is getting. He's going to be criticized no matter what he does. Like I've often said, that if President Trump was seen walking on the reflection pond at the Washington Monument, the New York Times headline would be Trump can't swim. So he can't win with the media. I'm not even remotely saying that. But the Democrats are begging President Trump to be a fascist president. The very thing they have falsely accused him of for the last 3.5 years, they're wanting him to do, like nationalize businesses and all. It's something I think we should at least talk a little bit about. And I'm not a politically correct person, period. So if you're tuning into our show for the first time, first of all, where you been? Secondly, glad to have you. But if you're tuning in for political correctness, you got the wrong place. I try to deliver the news in a seriously entertaining way. And it's hard to be entertaining with all the gloom and doom, some of it real, some of it projected, but it's out there nonetheless. Rudolf Sabak, a former state commissioner, this is in Serbia again. We're going to talk about some other countries. This is happening, by the way, in some form or fashion all over Europe. It's not just limited to Serbia. It's maybe the most extreme example. But a former state commissioner for personal data protection says by proclaiming a state of emergency, the president of Serbia, Vučić, has assumed full supremacy over decision-making during a crisis, although his constitutional role is only ceremonial. So think about this. You have a president that's basically in a way like the Queen of England, so to speak. It's more of a ceremonial role, but now has assumed authority and is issuing executive orders and emergency decrees which people are following. So this president of Serbia is actually gone way beyond what the people in Serbia voted for in their constitution, but it sounds like that they're willing to go along with it because of the fear of the coronavirus. And it's real. The fear is definitely real. But Sobek said he issues orders which are automatically accepted by the government, no checks and balances. And here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. I like Biden. I'll talk like Biden. Here's the deal. Dictators have arisen. If you look anywhere in the world where dictators have arisen, where fascist governments have actually risen, there's one thing they have in common. They usually rise to power during times of great fear and panic on behalf of their citizens. And it can be anything from, like in Nazi Germany, when Hitler rose, one of the main reasons was that the economy was in total shambles and people were desperate. It wasn't about a pandemic, but it was about the aftermath of World War I. And people, you want to know how how could people actually, tune into Hitler? Well, it's because they were desperate and looking for any port in a storm, so to speak. And so strange things happen when people get desperate. And here's something, I want to show you this meme of Benjamin Franklin, one of the wisest people that our country has ever produced. Check this out. If we got it, let's hope we can put it up there. The Ben Franklin meme. We got that one, Billy Bob? There we go. People willing to trade their freedom for security will receive neither. That is a very profound statement. It was true then, and it is literally happening now. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. We are definitely trading our freedom for security. The whole shutdown, the whole lockdown, the whole shelter at home is a definite sacrifice that the American people are making and giving up freedom for the security of curing this pandemic. Now, as I say, I'm not necessarily being critical, but I would not be doing my job and I would not be true to myself if I didn't point this out to you, that we need to be given up our freedoms grudgingly so. Because let me tell you, one thing that is pretty much for sure, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So government at every level is reticent to give away powers once they have gotten them. So we give up our freedom for the security at the peril of the very freedom that Benjamin Franklin is talking about. We need to be listening to this more now than ever. In an ex-communist Eastern Europe, elsewhere, populist leaders are introducing harsh measures, including uncontrolled cell phone surveillance of their citizens and lengthy jail sentences for those who flout lockdown decrees. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we're not all that far off. There are people implementing and certainly proposing that people be arrested for violating various things of this shelter at home deal. Now, think about the irony of that. The government wants us to shelter at home, basically stay, house arrest. Think about if you just got off a house arrest and you're back on it by the government decree. We're all on a state of house arrest right now. How much further do we need to go? Would it be a shock to you if things get worse that they don't put bracelets on all of us and track our very movements? I don't think that's as far-fetched as it may seem. And there are some people who right now would say, oh, that my neighbor's acting irresponsible. You definitely need to track him or her. And so I question, are we really that far off? And think about this as I want to get back to this point I was going to make. Billy Bob, if you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, he's Billy Bob Bass. He has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. Some of us are sicker than others, and yes, I am a fish whisperer, so to speak. But the government, pretty much everywhere, it hadn't really happened in Florida, but it is certainly spreading. The government is releasing prisoners on a regular basis. Actually, they've done it here locally at our local jail. Now, some of who they've released, I probably would agree with. If you're doing, like for instance, locally here, if you've been doing weekend sentences, then they're telling you, hey, that sentence is suspended until further notice. So and if you only have like a month to do, let's say on a 6-month sentence, they're releasing you. Some of that makes sense, but they are releasing people now that are accused of murder, literally in New York. And so at the same time that they're asking us to stay locked in our houses, they're releasing criminals back on the street. And as we talked about yesterday, if you didn't see our show, and we'll get into it in just a second, they're actually pressure to stop you from purchasing a gun. They're actually talking about and have in some places, and we're shutting down gun stores until the president came out and said that gun stores are an essential business. They were happily shutting them down. So, believe me, it can happen here. By the way, if you want to check out our podcast, the easiest way to do that is go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page. Of course, I hope you'll like it and share it with others. You can watch our YouTube channel. We've got it up to date now, and we're archiving our shows there. We're on America's Voice News. We're broadcasting on America's Voice News. Download the free app on your iPhone, Android. We're streaming on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. We're now on brand new on Pluto TV, which is a streaming channel. If you haven't seen it on those devices, check it out. Pluto. I actually watch the Addams Family reruns on that, but you can now see John Martin Talks on that. And of course, we're now on Dish Network through America's Voice News, channel 219. So we're going not only globally, nationwide, but universal. Check it out. I will tell you, they're moving our show around when they rebroadcast it, and it's been I think it played at like midnight. They're actually saying that maybe I should be a late night TV host. So, hey, check it out. You'll find it, but you can always find it archived as well on America's Voice News website. More will be revealed. The human rights chief of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said that while she understands the need to act swiftly to protect populations from COVID-19 pandemic, the newly declared states of emergency must include a time limit and parliamentary oversight. So she's saying that, she's saying that that there needs to be a time limit on this type of stuff. Said OSCE rights chief Ingeborg Solorum Gladys Thorn. Hey, I can't say today. There ain't too many Gladys Thororos in Hawthorne. A state of emergency, wherever it is declared for whatever reason, must be proportionate to its aim and only remain in place for as long as absolutely necessary. So you say, oh, well, that's, Europe, that's some of the Eastern blocs that were communists, so maybe they're used to it. But I'm telling you, it's already happening here. Check this out. Governor Ralph Northam, he's the famous governor in Virginia that wants to come and get your guns, believe that, but he also wants to make the baby comfortable before we actually kill it. That guy, him, he actually decreed that in the state of Virginia, even though the president has basically said that we're going to continue this shelter at home at least till the end of April, Northam one-upped him, or at least 10 times upped him, so to speak, a few weeks ago when he declared that Virginia is going to be shut down at least till June 10th. So like 3 months. Now, he's not, is he basing that on science? I'm not sure. But this is what he said, Ralph Northam, right here in the great state of Virginia, in the good old USA. He said, we are at the beginning of a period of sacrifice. I wonder what he's actually sacrificing. He said, this is an unprecedented and difficult time. And it is. I'm not disputing that in any way, shape, or form. But I remind you of what one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, and we showed this earlier, what he said: if you're willing to give up freedom for security, you'll end up with neither. I mean, I'm telling you, these words are going to echo truer and truer. They were true then, and they are definitely true now. And we need to at least think about this. This is what I'm asking you as the American people. I'm asking you to at least think about what we're doing. And we'll get more into some of my thoughts on that in a minute. Amnesty International researcher Massimo Moriarty, I say that easier, I guess, said states of emergency are allowed under international human rights law, but warned that restrictive measures should not become the new normal. Well, let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of new normal, some of it imposed by government and some of it imposed by ourselves. I've been talking to people, and I'm not wishing this. I have no inside information on what I'm about to say. I think it just makes practical sense. Practical speculation, if you want to. I invent all kind of new words here. I don't believe right now, as it stands, that we're going to have a college football season or an NFL season. I just don't believe it's going to happen. And there's multiple reasons, but let me tell you, think about this and ask yourself this, and I don't say this with any relish. Even if everything goes well and we have, a certain amount of deaths, which are inevitable, but we get this thing under control, so to speak, in the next couple of months, are you really going to be ready to just jump? I know you're going to be ready to get the hell out of your house. I understand that. But are you really going to be ready to go to fill up a stadium with 60 to 80,000 people sitting like this? Are you really ready to do that? I don't see that coming back for a while. Now, I'm not wishing that. I'm going to miss it for sure. But let me just tell you, I believe certain things like sports are going to change significantly for the foreseeable future. I really believe that's going to be an impact. There are going to be multiple impacts on this. I think that the whole concept of social distancing, people are grabbing a hold of that pretty strong, and I understand it. I'm practicing it myself. But I really believe that is going to have ramifications down the line, that even a year or two from now, and maybe change our society indefinitely, that we're going to be practicing social distance a lot more than we ever did. And maybe that's a good thing, but I think we should have it on our radar screen. But it says such states need, talking about these states of emergency, such states need to last only until the danger lasts, that he told the Associated Press. Paul, let me just tell you this, and this is not directed at President Trump as the president. This is just directed at the office of president, the politicians in general. It doesn't matter who's in the office. Let me just tell you what is the absolute truth. Politicians do not like to give up power. They just don't. Our presidency, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump per se, but the office of the presidency has expanded. Go back and read the Constitution. Something we should, if you're bored, you ought to reread the Constitution and some of our other founding documents, really. That could be your homework assignment. Because the office of presidency has expanded to the point that our founding fathers wouldn't even recognize it. If they knew how much power the president has in these days, they would be flabbergasted. They would think either that the Constitution has been amended, changed, or whatever. They would not believe that we're still operating under a constitutional government. And as I say, I'm not labeling that on President Trump, but that's what they do. They always do that. And I don't see them giving up this power very I'll tell you about it in a minute. In a European Union member, Hungary, Parliament on Monday passed a law giving Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government the right to rule by decree for as long as the state of emergency declared March 11th is in effect. Let me tell you, if Obama was president right now, you don't think Nancy Pelosi and them would say, hey, you just do whatever you need to do for as long as you need to do it. The only thing keeping the office of presidency from being called out to do whatever you need to do is the fact that it's Donald Trump and a Republican. Believe that. But let me tell you, and this is scary stuff. I got to tell you a story. I haven't shared this really with too many people. But, I used to be mayor of my little city of Hawthorne. I want to give you a personal example. And I'm not comparing myself to President of the United States. But we had back-to-back hurricanes when I was mayor in our town. And literally the eye of two hurricanes within a week passed right over our town. And it devastated all of this part of Florida, especially when it came to infrastructure, power lines, of course, water supplies, all this kind of stuff. And during that time, our city manager actually got injured and could not serve. So I declared a state of emergency in the city of Hawthorne, which gives you some powers to do certain things. And essentially for about we had commission meetings a little bit, but for really about 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even almost a month, I essentially was running my little city. Now, I'd like to think I did a pretty good job, but I can tell you that that kind of power is addicting, where you're just telling people what to do. Because it's one thing to have a commission meeting and have to debate with your fellow commissioners about what to do. But, when you know that you're right, you're self-righteous. And I think human beings, we all fall short of the glory. That I had to guard, let me just tell you, I had to guard against this idea that I had absolute power. I really did. Now, I think I did a pretty fair job, pat myself on the back, but I could see how over time that could corrupt anyone. And I could also see that in the wrong hands, wow, look out. So, this is something we need to be aware of. I am not saying that President Trump has overstepped it. I'm simply giving us a warning that human nature allows us to do that sometimes. The law also sets prison terms. This is in Hungary, I think. The law also sets prison terms of up to 5 years for those convicted of spreading false information about the pandemic, and up to 8 years for those interfering with efforts to contain the spread of the coronavirus, like a curfew or quarantine. Now, let me tell you, there are Democrats out there right now that if they could wave a magic wand, they'd put Trump in prison right this minute for declaring false information. Nancy Pelosi, and we did an in-depth story about it just the other day, she literally came out and essentially said that we need to investigate President Trump when all of this is behind us. And I'm telling you, it is a thin line between exercising caution and being protective of our nation and absolutely giving away all of what people have fought and died for. Hungarian Justice Minister Judith Varga said criticism of Hungary's bill were political attacks based on the wrong interpretation or intentional distortion of its context. Wrong, think about that. Wrong interpretations or intentional distortions, bad thoughts. That's what they're talking about. The wrong. How do you have the wrong? What does that mean? The wrong interpretation. Isn't an interpretation just that, an interpretation? So now you're saying that people could literally be in prison for interpreting something different than what you do. Bad thoughts, wrong opinions. Believe me. Hey, when Obama is willing to use the IRS to attack Tea Party groups, and that wasn't even during a state of emergency, other than the fact that people were the rise of the Tea Party, I guess, was an emergency situation. But think about that. When the IRS can be used as a weapon, what do you think people will do when you're really afraid? Just keep that in mind. Our governments have also adopted extreme measures in other governments. Give you a couple examples. In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu's caretaker government passed a series of emergency executive measures to try to quell the spread of the new virus. These include authorizing unprecedented electronic surveillance of Israeli citizens. So they want to know where you're going, who you're meeting with, crowds of people. A slowdown of court activity. So they're basically slowing down the courts. That forced the postponement of Netanyahu's own pending corruption trial. Now, I'm a big fan of Benjamin Netanyahu, but trust me, he's happy that his trial has been postponed. And I don't even think that, based on what I've seen, there should be one. But I'm pointing out that that is potentially an abuse of power, a self-serving. In Russia, oh my God, Russia. In Russia, authorities have turned up the pressure on media outlets and social media users to control the narrative amid the country's growing coronavirus outbreak. Got to control us. We all know that they've been doing that for a while here, with the blessings basically of our own government controlling what we say. I can tell you countless times where we've been controlled by social media. And just so you know it, I got to say it every now and then, my old buddy Algorithm. Now, I don't want to battle with Mr. Algorithm, so peace be with you, brother. I'm praying for you, Algorithm, and I hope you will pray and let me be free. Give us free, Algorithm. Images of transformation of a huge communist-era exhibition hall in Belgrade into a makeshift hospital for infected patients has triggered widespread public fear of the detention camp-looking facility that is filled with row upon row of 3,000 metal beds. Check out this picture. I think we got a picture of it. Look at that. And there's actually a broader one I probably should have got. But this is set up, and we're doing the same. This is happening in New York. I'm not downplaying the need for this, so make sure you understand that. I'm not saying that. But this gives people, especially in this part of Europe, a bit of the jitters because they have been herded up for various reasons before. And trust me, things can get out of whack here. With fear can motivate you to do a lot of things. Think about it. We talk about concentration camps. The fear of Japanese led us to have concentration camps in this country, brought to you by the Democratic Party. I'm just saying. The Serbian president said he was glad that people got scared, adding he would have chosen even a worse-looking spot if that would have stopped Serbs from flouting his stay-at-home orders. So he wants them to be scared. He wants them to be scared. Political leaders oftentimes take advantage of our fears. And believe me, you don't see that already? They're trying to push like the Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, and I'm not letting the Republicans off the hook here either, but the Democrats are pushing all kind of things that they can't get legislatively because they think you're afraid enough that you'll just stand by and let anything happen. You know, what did James Clyburn say recently? And we talked about it on one of our shows, that, this is a golden opportunity to push our vision. That's what he said. He wasn't talking about, helping people, get cured of the coronavirus, but to push their vision. If you don't think politicians in this country are capable of using our fear to take away our freedoms, then you just got your head in the sand. But Vucci said someone has to spend 14 to 28 days there, talking about these hospitals. It's not comfortable. I don't care. We are fighting for people's lives. So they'll tell you they're fighting for people's lives. And I'm not necessarily questioning that. But let me just ask you this. Is simply existing Now, everybody wants to live, man. I want to live, see my grandkids grow up, and I'd like to see some great grandkids. I'm not in a hurry for that, but I got a lot of reasons for wanting to live. So I have no death wish whatsoever. But is simply existing, which is an age-old question for humanity, is existing enough? Think about something that Patrick Henry said. You remember good old Patrick Henry? Yeah. How about that? Give me liberty or give me death. That is something a lot of people know, but I want to show you a little bit longer excerpt from what Patrick Henry actually said, and we got it in the form of a meme up here, and I'm going to read it out there. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Now, I'm not saying we all need to die from the coronavirus, but when it came to trading liberty for freedom, for security, Patrick Henry is asking a question and making a statement that we need to ask ourselves. And as I say, what troubles me the most about what is happening is how readily we are willing to accept it. There's been very little debate that I hear publicly at all. So I just want to put that to your attention. It may not be politically correct nor politically popular, but that's not what I'm about anyway. Anyway, thank you for listening to that. All right. Oh, by the way, if you agree or disagree, chime in on the Facebook networks you're listening to, whatever one you're on. Citizens for Trump, howdy, good morning, how are you? America's Voice News, peace be with you. Let me know. I will respond to you as quickly as possible. We're literally getting hundreds of comments now, even up into the thousands, and I greatly appreciate that, and I am determined. It gives me something to do when I'm sheltering at home, so keep them coming. All right, we're going to move on to a Breitbart article, and it kind of ties in to what we were just talking about and what's happening here. Seattle police chief, call 911 if you hear racist name calling. Now, what they're centrally talking about here is the threat to Asian Americans by people perceiving the Chinese people as being responsible for the coronavirus. That's what this centers around. We're going to get into it. Law enforcement officials in Seattle are cracking down on hate crimes and urging residents to call 911 over racist name calling. Now, I'm not advocating for racist name calling, but has it really risen to the point that we need to call 911? That makes no sense at all to me, especially in Washington, which is one of the centers, hotspots for coronavirus. Why would you tie up emergency lines over name calling, no matter how bad it is? Violence is a whole other thing. Now, I do believe one can lead to another, but 911 is a bit much. Police Chief Carmen Best and former King 5 reporter Laura Matowskiwa put out a video on Monday claiming there is zero tolerance for hate crimes against Asian Americans during the coronavirus pandemic. Best, the chief of police, said Washington State is no place for hate. Now, what place is? And here's the deal with me, man. I've never understood what a hate crime is. I don't understand hate crime legislation. I got to tell you, I don't. Now, I'm someone who is adamantly opposed to racism in any form or fashion. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. We have pretty much eliminated institutionally, but you cannot, at least right now, and I don't even know I want to be able to control what's in a person's heart. Racism absolutely exists in many forms and fashions, and all races seem to be capable of it. And I'm not downplaying it against Black Americans have experienced it probably more than others, but there's a laundry list of people in some form fashion who've experienced, but what exactly is a hate crime? For instance, if you talk about murdering somebody, isn't it already, don't you pretty much have to hate someone to murder them? I just don't understand it. We have the death penalty in the state of Florida. That's the extreme capitalist punishment. The highest level of punishment in our state is the electric chair or lethal injection. Now, what more can you do to a person? So if a person commits a hate crime that rises to the level of capital punishment, dead is dead. I don't get it. It's like my dear friend Ted Yoho, who is our congressman here. Howdy, Ted. You're doing a great job. I'm going to miss you. He's decided not to run for re-election. But he was one of the few congressmen that voted against this latest lynching law. And he basically said, and he was right, he said, in my state, talking about Florida, we already kill you if you kill someone, basically, is what he said. So the whole lynching law made no sense whatsoever. Lynching is illegal anywhere in the United States of America. And in most places, it is punishable by up to death. So what more do you want? I've never understood hate crime stuff. It just makes people feel better about something. It's a feel-good thing. It really has no basis in reality. It confuses the issue to me. Crime is crime, period. But this police chief said, we will document and investigate every reported crime. Even racist name-calling should be reported to police. Not necessarily arguing that, but certainly not 911. We take this information very seriously. If you aren't sure a hate crime occurred, so if you're not sure if it's a hate crime or not, call 911. We're here to help and we'll respond to investigate. Call 911 if you're not sure if a hate crime has been committed. That makes no sense to me. And as I kind of said earlier, but it bears repeating, because if I say it, it bears repeating. Progressives are letting people out of prison, trying to close gun stores, but name calling is the top issue. That's what we need to really be worried about. And oh, by the way, did you see that Australia just banned the sale of all guns until further notice? I didn't get too in depth in the story, but that's pretty interesting. It could and would happen here if we don't stay vigilant. The bigoted comments, keep them to yourself. No one person in the country is to blame for COVID-19. And I agree with that. We are in this together. COVID-19 does not discriminate based on race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, or anything else. And that is true. But what about science? I mean, they're insinuating that to call this the Chinese, corona or the Wuhan or whatever. I mean, I understand people get offended by, kung flu fighting and everything else. But what about the science? One of the things about any type of pandemic, any type of viral thing, you need to track down patient zero. You need to find where it came from and how it started. That is critical from a scientific point of view to understanding this. And the Chinese have been, and I'm not talking about the Chinese people, but the Chinese communists have been lying about this, spreading false information from day one, and they're still doing it. And they're opening up, for instance, these crazy food markets where people eat bats are starting to come out again. So this idea that we shouldn't know where these pandemics are coming from is ludicrous and absolute. And it's really a hate crime in that sense, that it's a crime against humanity for the very group of people that say, you got to believe in science. It's science to know where the diseases come from. This is not prejudice. Ebola is named Ebola because it was first found in the Ebola River, along the banks of the Ebola River. What is it, MERS or whatever, which is Middle Eastern Respiratory. It came from the Middle East. It is essential to know these things. It's not prejudice. Now, I'm not saying that people of Asian descent hadn't been treated poorly behind some of this, and where that happens, it needs to be stopped. But the idea that we don't need to know what the science behind this is stupid. All right, let me check my time. We got just a couple more minutes, so I just want to get into this thing about the border really quickly. And this is from a Tribune content agency. I've not used this source before. This is an opinion piece by David Horsey, a political commentator for the LA Times. Trump should claim victory on the border, abandon his foolish wall. If he was surefire, it was surefire applause line, one he pulled out of his rhetorical grab bag, talking about the president, whenever he saw he was losing the enthusiasm of the crowd at his rallies, talking about build the wall. I don't know about you, and we may never get to go to another Trump rally. That could be a consequence of this virus. But I can tell you, if you've ever been one, I've never seen one where the president for any moment lost enthusiasm of the crowd. I have not seen that. But he's saying the president when he lost enthusiasm would say, "I will build a big and beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it." And he's saying, if we're lucky, though, now that he is president, Donald Trump will renege on his biggest campaign promise. So lucky, Trump has been right all along. You look at there's a litany of things that President Trump has been right about, and border security is like the in thing now around the world, right? This writer said he could simply talk about the president, declare victory, and say a wall along the border with Mexico is no longer necessary because illegal crossings have diminished to a trickle. And that is true, that for various reasons, some of which are the policies of turning people back. But to me, right now is the best possible time to build the wall, where there's not so much pressure on the border, would make it a whole lot easier. And let me just say, because we're about out of time, I just want to explain this. He says in this article basically that President Trump, wanted to build a solid wall all across the Mexican border, and that that people who support him have believed whatever Donald Trump says. That's a bunch of BS, man. From the very beginning, President Trump uses sound bites. It's hard to have a long, articulate policy at a rally. That's not what they're about. But I can tell you, and I think I can speak for most MAGA hat wearing people. I've had a lot of discussions with people literally all over the country. No one really expected that there would be this huge wall on every point of the border. This idea that we build walls where they're needed, there are natural barricades like mountain ranges and desert. We may not need one. We could maybe do it with electronic surveillance. There is no one that I know that has literally said build 100% wall every inch of the way, which is one of the talking points they want to do about this. He says Trump's detractors, meanwhile, would breathe a sigh of relief because the wall is insanely expensive absurdity. Really? He says it's estimated that building a giant impervious 1,900-mile wall, like I said, no one really proposed that, has proposed costs would cost as much as $38 billion, sucking funding away from far more worthy and vital infrastructure projects. $38 billion. Didn't we just pass $2.3 trillion? $38 billion. I'm not trying to say it's nothing, but it's a drop in the bucket. But let me just close with this. The Democrats tried to pour everything into this stimulus package and, just said, oh, it's the right time and everything else. Can you imagine what would happen if Trump had said, well, I'm not going to sign this unless you give me $38 billion for the wall? I mean, it would have been the end of the world, so to speak, as we know it. So I'm hoping that the president will absolutely stand on this, build the wall. As I've been saying for a long time, it's better for us all. Borders absolutely matter. There is really no debate about that now. Look back, and I'll say this and we'll close. Look back at what the 2020 Democrats, including, by the way, old Sleepy Joe, bloated Joe Biden, was for, and look at the shelf life on them now. The major things they were campaigning on, from the Green New Deal, right up through no borders and an open and a welfare state and free medical care for everybody who can get to this country. All of those things were ludicrous now and ludicrous then and downright dangerous now. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. We're revamping our website, and we will have a swag store up very, very soon, because a lot of people are asking me how they can support me. The best way is to share it far and wide. As I've been saying, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.